In the 47th stellar century, during a calm period later remembered as the quiet expansion era, the galaxy felt stable and predictable. Large empires controlled fixed regions, trade routes were mapped, and real wars had become rare. The Zarkon Dominion was one of the strongest powers of that time. Their territory stretched across dozens of systems, including the heavily fortified Sector 9A, and their fleets were feared for their size alone. Because of this long dominance, many Zarkon leaders believed there was nothing left in the galaxy that could truly surprise them. High Commander Vorex Tal was one of those leaders. He had spent most of his career crushing pirate clans and forcing smaller civilizations into surrender without long battles. His flagship, the massive dread carrier Void Crown, had never been seriously damaged. To Vorex, war had become routine, almost boring. So when long-range scouts reported a quiet, lightly populated region labeled Human Outer Space Sector H1, he saw it not as a risk, but as an opportunity. The reports described human space as calm and silent. No large patrol fleets were detected. Their border stations appeared old and inactive. Trade ships passed through nearby sectors without escorts. To Vorex, this meant weakness. He openly mocked the idea that humans were a serious military power. In council briefings, he referred to them as merchants who relied on diplomacy instead of strength. Other Zarkon officers hesitated, suggesting caution, but Vorex dismissed their concerns with confidence built from decades of easy victories. The plan was simple: cross the border near planet Ashkara 7, claim the system, and establish a forward base. From there, the Zarkon Dominion could slowly expand deeper into human territory. Vorex believed the humans would protest, perhaps threaten, but eventually submit. In his mind, this would be remembered as a quiet annexation, not a war. As the Void Crown moved toward the border, it was followed by support ships and escort cruisers, their hulls glowing with Zarkon markings. Sensors showed nothing unusual. No human warships approached. No warning messages were received. The border marker was crossed without resistance, and the fleet entered Sector H1. On the command deck, Zarkon officers relaxed. Some even laughed, convinced that the stories of human resilience were exaggerated myths. What none of them realized was that the silence was not ignorance. It was attention. Hidden across the sector, human observation arrays tracked every movement of the Zarkon fleet. Their engines, weapon signatures, and fleet formation were logged in real time. On distant Terra Nova Prime, human analysts quietly updated threat models that had existed for centuries. The humans had long expected that one day, someone would ignore the warnings written into their borders. No alarms were raised. No defensive fleets were launched in haste. Instead, ancient protocols were activated calmly and without emotion. Timers began counting. Routes were calculated. Decisions made long ago were simply followed. Back on the Void Crown, Vorex Tal stood tall, watching Ashkara 7 grow larger on the main display. He imagined his name recorded in Dominion history as the commander who expanded their reach without firing a single shot. He believed he was making a bold move, one that proved Zarkon's superiority to the rest of the galaxy. He did not see the deeper truth. By crossing into human space without invitation, Vorex had not begun a negotiation. He had not even started a war. He had triggered a response designed for only one purpose: containment and erasure. The humans would not rush. They would not threaten. They would not boast. They would simply make sure that the mistake he had just made would never be repeated by anyone else. The Zarkon fleet moved deeper into human space with growing confidence. After crossing the border of Sector H1, nothing happened. No alarms, no defensive ships, no angry transmissions. Space remained quiet and empty, exactly as High Commander Vorex Tal had expected. To him, this silence was proof that the humans either did not care or did not have the power to respond. On the bridge of the dread carrier Void Crown, the mood was relaxed. Officers spoke freely, some even joking about how easily this mission was unfolding. Vorex ordered the fleet to maintain a steady advance toward the inner systems. The ships Void Crown, Dark Spear, and Grim Horizon held formation, their weapons powered but unused. Long-range sensors scanned for movement, but found nothing more than distant stars and slow-moving civilian traffic far away. Each minute without resistance made the Zarkon commander more certain that he had judged humans correctly. In his mind, strong civilizations made noise. Weak ones stayed silent. He addressed his officers with confidence, saying the humans were likely debating how to respond or preparing to send diplomats instead of soldiers. He reminded them that many species relied on words and treaties when faced with superior force. The Zarkon Dominion had seen this pattern many times before. Silence always came before surrender. His officers nodded, reassured by his experience and the empty space around them. What Vorex did not understand was that the silence was not fear. It was control. Far away on the human world Terra Nova Prime, the Human Defense Council had already classified the Zarkon fleet as an active incursion. There was no emergency meeting, no shouting. Every movement followed procedures written generations earlier. Human systems had been watching the border long before the first alien ship crossed it. When the fleet entered Sector H1, their presence was immediately logged, their paths predicted hours in advance. Captain Elias Ward stood on the command deck of the human warship HSS Iron Resolve, observing a tactical display filled with calm blue lines and symbols. The Zarkon fleet appeared as steady red markers, moving exactly where human analysts expected them to move. To Ward, the alien confidence was obvious. They were advancing like explorers, not invaders who feared resistance. That behavior alone confirmed everything humans needed to know. No message was sent to the aliens. Humans had learned long ago that early warnings only encouraged retreat, and retreat meant survival. This time, survival was not an option humans intended to offer. Instead, silent authorization codes spread across human space. Sensor nets sharpened, defense grids warmed from standby to ready. Ships that had been drifting quietly for months adjusted their positions by small, careful amounts. Back with the Zarkon fleet, Vorex Tal received reports that made him smile. Border stations remained inactive, human communication channels stayed quiet. Even as the fleet passed near old orbital platforms, there was no reaction. He took this as confirmation that humans lacked coordination, or worse, courage. In his arrogance, he believed that a strong species would have challenged him by now. As the fleet crossed from Sector H1 toward Sector H2, something subtle changed. Nothing dramatic, nothing alarming. Navigation systems updated star positions more frequently. Signal delay increased by fractions of a second. Small things, easily ignored. Zarkon technicians noted them, but found no clear cause. Vorex brushed it off, confident that minor issues were normal when operating far from home sectors. He gave orders to continue forward without slowing. The deeper they went, the more impressed the galaxy would be by his success. He imagined the reaction of rival commanders when they learned that human space had been entered without resistance. In his mind, this operation was already a victory. What he failed to realize was that every silent step forward placed his fleet further inside a controlled environment built to close behind them. Humans were not absent. They were patient. They were watching every decision, every course correction, every moment of alien confidence. The Zarkon fleet believed it was moving freely, but in truth, it was being guided, slowly and carefully, toward a place where silence would turn into something far more permanent. As the Zarkon fleet pushed deeper into human territory, confidence slowly began to turn into confusion. After leaving Sector H1 and entering Sector H3, the space around them felt the same at first: dark, wide, and empty. Stars burned quietly in the distance, and no human ships appeared. High Commander Vorex Tal stood firm in his belief that the humans were unprepared and disorganized. To him, this continued silence was still a sign of weakness. Then small problems started to appear. Navigation officers noticed that star positions were no longer matching long-range charts. The differences were tiny, almost meaningless, but they should not have existed at all. Zarkon star maps were precise, updated constantly by their empire. Yet now the stars seemed slightly out of place, as if space itself was shifting. Engineers blamed sensor drift and began recalibrating systems. Moments later, communication delays increased again. Orders sent from the Void Crown took longer to reach escort ships. The delay was only seconds, but in fleet operations, seconds mattered. Technicians reported no damage, no interference, no clear cause. Vorex listened, then waved the concerns away. He reminded his crew that operating far from Dominion space always caused technical strain. He ordered the fleet to maintain speed and formation. What he did not know was that nothing was malfunctioning. Across Sector H3, human control systems were activating layer by layer. Gravity fields were being adjusted slightly, not enough to alarm sensors, but enough to affect long-distance calculations. Signal pathways were being bent through artificial space distortions, causing delays that felt natural instead of hostile. Every effect was designed to look accidental. Far from the Zarkon fleet, human warships began to move. The HSS Silent Oath drifted out of a shadowed nebula, its engines barely glowing. The HSS Dawnbreaker adjusted position near a dead star, hiding behind radiation noise. The HSS Valkyrie powered up systems that had not been fully activated in decades. None of these ships rushed. They did not need to. The aliens were moving exactly where humans wanted them to move. Back on the Void Crown, tension slowly replaced humor. A supply ship reported irregular fuel consumption. Another escort briefly lost internal synchronization with fleet time signals. These were not failures, but they were unsettling. Vorex's officers exchanged uneasy looks. One suggested slowing the fleet to investigate. Vorex rejected the idea immediately. Slowing down, he said, would show doubt. Doubt invited resistance. He ordered the fleet to press forward. As hours passed, the space behind the Zarkon ships began to feel heavier. Jump calculations for return routes took longer to process. Emergency exit paths showed unstable results. Engineers insisted the fleet could still retreat if needed, but their voices lacked confidence. Vorex sensed the shift in mood and grew irritated. He accused his crew of imagining threats that were not there. Meanwhile, human command centers quietly marked the Zarkon fleet as fully committed. The moment of retreat was already closing. Automated human systems adjusted hyperspace corridors behind the fleet, narrowing them by small degrees. Nothing collapsed yet. Nothing dramatic happened. But each change made the path home less reliable. Each minute spent moving forward made turning back harder. Vorex walked the bridge, studying the tactical displays. He saw no enemies, no weapons fire, no warnings. But something about the silence now felt different. It was no longer empty. It felt watched. For the first time, the thought crossed his mind that the humans might be doing this on purpose. He dismissed the thought quickly. Strong species challenged invaders openly. They did not hide behind quiet tricks. That belief had served him well his entire career, and he clung to it now. He ordered another course correction toward the inner systems, determined to reach a populated human world and force a response. What he did not understand was that the response had already begun. The Zarkon fleet was no longer traveling through free space. It was inside a carefully shaped environment, controlled by a civilization that had learned, through centuries of survival, that the best trap was one the enemy never realized existed. By the time Vorex Tal finally accepted that something was very wrong, the invisible net had already closed around him, and every path forward led deeper into it. For the first time since entering human space, the Zarkon fleet received a message. It did not arrive with alarms or weapon locks. There was no threat in the tone, no demand for surrender. The transmission simply appeared across every screen aboard the dread carrier Void Crown and its escort ships. The image was clear and stable. A human stood calmly on the display, wearing a simple uniform. His name appeared beneath him. Captain Elias Ward, commanding officer of the human warship HSS Iron Resolve. His voice was steady and controlled. He spoke slowly, as if time itself was on his side. He stated that the Zarkon fleet had crossed into human-controlled space without permission. He did not accuse them of aggression. He did not insult them. He simply said that humans considered border violations a first strike, and humans did not forgive first strikes. The words were simple, but their meaning carried weight. High Commander Vorex Tal felt the atmosphere on the bridge change instantly. Conversation stopped. Officers leaned closer to their screens. Some stared in silence. Others showed clear signs of unease. Vorex had expected panic or threats if humans ever spoke. What he received instead was something far more unsettling: calm certainty. The transmission continued. Captain Ward displayed archived records. Fleets from past centuries appeared in cold, clear data projections. Each one had crossed into human space. Each one had advanced confidently. Each one had vanished completely. No survivors. No wreckage returned. The date spanned hundreds of years. The pattern was unmistakable. Humans had faced this situation before, many times, and the outcome had never changed. Vorex felt a tight pressure in his chest. He had never seen a civilization document its enemy's destruction so calmly. There was no pride in the human's voice. No anger, just facts. Humans were not explaining themselves. They were informing the Zarkon fleet of a rule that had already been enforced many times before. Around the Void Crown, the escort ships reported increased system checks. Engineers ran diagnostics again and again, finding nothing broken, yet nothing fully reassuring either. Navigation data remained slightly unstable. Communication lag persisted. Small problems continued to stack up, each one harmless on its own, but together they created a sense of quiet dread. While the Zarkon fleet struggled with uncertainty, human forces moved with purpose. The HSS Silent Oath adjusted its position near a shadowed region of space, its profile masked by background radiation. The HSS Dawnbreaker locked into a calculated firing corridor, still far out of sensor range. The HSS Valkyrie powered up systems designed to disrupt command structures rather than destroy ships outright. Every human vessel knew its place. Every movement followed a plan older than any living crew member. Vorex ordered his officers to respond to the transmission, but words failed him. He could not threaten without proof of strength. He could not negotiate without admitting weakness. Silence, once his advantage, now felt like a trap closing in. His confidence began to crack. For the first time, he wondered if advancing further had been a mistake. Captain Ward did not wait for a reply. Before ending the transmission, he spoke one final sentence. He said humans did not rush into battle. They waited until their borders were crossed deeply enough that retreat was no longer simple. Then the screen went dark. On the bridge, no one spoke. Vorex paced slowly, his mind racing. He demanded updates on hyperspace exit routes. The reports were troubling. Calculations showed increasing instability. Engineers insisted retreat was still possible, but their voices lacked conviction. The deeper truth was beginning to surface. The Zarkon fleet was not being attacked, but it was being controlled. Human command observed every reaction. Fear was visible now in the alien fleet's behavior. Minor course corrections became hesitant. Formation tightened defensively. Humans marked these signs calmly. The invaders had reached the stage humans recognized well, realization without escape. Vorex finally understood what made humans dangerous. They did not meet force with force immediately. They allowed arrogance to grow. They allowed enemies to commit fully. Then, they acted without hesitation or mercy. The message from Captain Elias Ward was not the beginning of a conflict. It was confirmation that the conflict had already been decided long before the Zarkon fleet crossed the border. The Zarkon fleet had advanced far into human space, and now the first signs of true danger began to appear. High Commander Vorex Tau was still convinced that humans were weak, but subtle changes in navigation and communication had started to make even his officers uneasy. Then the humans made their first real move, though it was invisible to the Zarkon fleet. Behind them, the hyper-exit gates of Sector H3 began to collapse. The aliens did not notice immediately. To them, space still appeared vast and free, yet every path they could use to retreat or call for reinforcements was slowly being sealed. Every exit route was closing, leaving the fleet trapped without their knowledge. On the dread carrier Void Crown, Vorex ordered long-range scans to confirm the borders and check for hidden fleets. His engineers reported nothing unusual, only minor shifts in space that were easily explained as sensor errors. Vorex interpreted these reports as routine, but small doubts began to creep into the minds of his officers. Whispers filled the command deck. Why is the jump corridor unstable? Why do signals from support ships take longer than expected? Each question added tension, though no one dared speak directly to Vorex about fear. He did not tolerate hesitation. Meanwhile, human ships were already moving into their calculated positions. HSS Silent Oath adjusted its angle behind a dense asteroid belt, almost invisible to alien sensors. HSS Dawnbreaker and HSS Valkyrie moved in precise formations near radiation clouds, leaving no trace. Every human ship was part of a system designed centuries in advance to trap intruders. Humans did not attack yet. They had no reason. The fleet was already where they wanted it. Patience was their weapon, and the trap had been set with perfection. Back on the Zarkon fleet, crew members began to notice small but worrying effects. Navigation consoles displayed errors that should have been impossible. Fuel consumption rates fluctuated for no logical reason. Communication between ships became slightly delayed and jittery. Engineers tried to correct the issues, but no fixes worked. Vorex grew frustrated. He berated his officers, calling their concerns imaginary. Still, unease was spreading quietly among the fleet. Confidence, once absolute, was beginning to crack. Time moved slowly as humans maintained silent control. They monitored every alien movement, every calculation, every tiny change in formation. No ships fired, no alarms sounded. Humans had no need for spectacle. Each Zarkon maneuver was expected, and each small disruption in alien systems was intentionally calculated. Humans created the illusion of random failure, but nothing was accidental. Every step the Zarkon fleet took was pushing them deeper into the trap, and every second reduced their chances of escape. The aliens began to realize they were not moving freely. Vorex still refused to admit the possibility of a trap, but crew whispers became louder. "We are losing control of our exit paths," one officer said under his breath. "The corridors are closing faster than we can respond," another added. The dread carrier Void Crown and its escorts were now inside a space that humans could manipulate silently. Even if the aliens tried to flee, it would take longer than they realized, and every delay increased vulnerability. Vorex ordered a review of every hyperspace route. Maps were checked twice, 3 times. Yet anomalies persisted. Minor misalignments, signal delays, and navigation errors added up. The fleet's morale was dropping. Officers who once joked freely now walked silently, heads down, glancing nervously at displays. Vorex insisted they continue, insisting that humans were bluffing, that this was just a clever trick to scare them. But even he could feel the weight of the unknown pressing against them. The humans continued to remain invisible, almost ghost-like. On Terra Nova Prime, analysts monitored alien reactions and adjusted control grids to ensure the trap remained stable. Each human move was minimal yet critical. The goal was not to fight yet, but to make the aliens feel enclosed, trapped, and powerless. Every moment of silence from the humans was a lesson in control and patience. By the time the fleet realized the severity of its situation, the full scope of the trap was almost complete. Paths for retreat had closed, signal connections had weakened, and navigation systems were increasingly unreliable. The Zarkon fleet had no way out, yet still they believed that one bold maneuver could save them. The humans did not fear confrontation. They had already won without firing a shot. The dread carrier Void Crown and its escorts had entered a controlled space where every move was anticipated, every response predicted, and every escape carefully blocked. By the end of this quiet preparation, Vorex Tal's arrogance and the fleet's confidence had been replaced by unease, the first real recognition that they were completely inside human control. The moment came suddenly, though the Zarkon fleet had no idea it was near. For weeks, High Commander Vorex Tal had believed he was advancing freely, controlling the situation, and preparing to establish a foothold deep in human space. The humans had waited, silent and patient, and now their preparation turned into action. The first shots were not fired from a distance. They were precise strikes aimed at command vessels. The dread carrier Void Crown shuddered as the HSS Dawnbreaker, commanded by Captain Mira Cade, fired energy pulses that disabled shields in targeted points. The fleet could barely respond before more human ships appeared from hidden positions. HSS Valkyrie and HSS Silent Oath cut off retreat paths with simultaneous precision strikes, leaving the aliens trapped. The attack lasted only 9 standard minutes, but for the Zarkon fleet, it felt endless. Alarms screamed across every ship. Vorex Tal ran from console to console, trying to coordinate a defense. Orders were sent, weapons were fired, but the humans moved faster than any sensor could track. The dread carrier Void Crown's shields were breached, and critical systems were knocked offline before the commander could fully understand what had happened. The alien officers were stunned. Many had never experienced such coordinated precision. They had expected resistance, but not this level of speed, control, and planning. One by one, the alien ships began to fall. Grim Horizon was the first to be completely disabled. Its engines shut down, leaving it drifting helplessly as energy arcs danced across its hull. The crew tried to activate emergency systems, but each attempt was anticipated and neutralized by human targeting algorithms. Communication with the Void Crown became sporadic. Panic spread through the Zarkon command network, and the illusion of control that Vorex had relied on evaporated instantly. Vorex Tal barked orders to regroup, but his fleet was too scattered. The humans had positioned themselves in vectors that cut off every possible escape. HSS Dawnbreaker moved in from behind an asteroid belt, hitting supply lines and crippling support ships. HSS Valkyrie intercepted long-range transmissions, ensuring that alien officers could not coordinate. The aliens had always believed that superior numbers could overcome strategy, but now, outnumbered in their own understanding, they were helpless. The attack was not only technical, it was psychological. Each strike was measured to instill fear and confusion. The alien fleet, confident just minutes earlier, now faced silence where there was no communication, drift where there should have been maneuvering, and darkness where there should have been escape. The humans never shouted. They did not gloat. Their presence was calm, precise, and devastating. Vorex Tal realized his mistake too late. Every assumption about human weakness had been wrong. Every estimate of their patience and planning had been flawed. Humans did not need large numbers or flashy weapons to control the outcome. Their preparation had been meticulous. Every fleet movement, every positioning, every energy allocation had been calculated to perfection, and now the aliens were paying the price. By the end of the 9 minutes, only scattered pieces of the Zarkon fleet remained operational, and even those were crippled and isolated. The Void Crown was heavily damaged, its weapons partially offline, and its shields flickering. Vorex Tal watched helplessly as Captain Mira Cade's ship moved to deliver the final disabling strike. Grim Horizon was gone. Dark Spear was drifting. The fleet that had entered human space with confidence was now on the verge of complete destruction. No alien cried for help. No backup arrived. Human forces had already anticipated every contingency. The galaxy outside human space had no knowledge of the attack yet. Within the trap, the humans had already won. Vorex Tal's last transmission was incomplete, cut off mid-sentence by energy arcs from the HSS Dawnbreaker. The silence that followed was overwhelming. Ships drifted, alarms faded, and the once proud Zarkon fleet was reduced to powerless hulks. From the perspective of the humans, the battle had been flawless. Not a single human ship was lost. Not a single shot wasted. Every calculation had succeeded. Every move had worked exactly as intended. To them, this was the demonstration of patience, discipline, and the simple principle that human space would never be violated without consequence. The Zarkon Dominion had learned the most important lesson of all. The humans may not fight first, but when they do, it is final. Weeks passed after the devastating attack on the Zarkon fleet, yet the galaxy remained silent. No ships returned to Sector 9A, no wreckage drifted across trade routes, and no transmissions escaped from the crippled alien fleet. Across distant civilizations, whispers began to spread. Traders, explorers, and minor factions who had once considered human space lightly now spoke in cautious tones. Something had happened, but no one knew exactly what. The few who had sensors near Sector H3 reported empty space where once a powerful fleet had entered. It was as if the aliens had simply vanished. The mystery alone created tension, curiosity, and fear throughout the surrounding sectors. In human space, nothing changed publicly. On Terra Nova Prime, the Human Defense Council quietly logged every detail of the engagement. Every movement, every outcome, every alien response was stored in precise records. Analysts compared the operation to centuries of historical encounters, noting patterns, timing, and strategy. To humans, this was not a war story to boast about. It was a lesson in control, patience, and maintaining borders. They had acted decisively, but without fanfare, without shouting. The lesson was clear. Human space was not open to trespassers, and the galaxy was learning that indirectly. Galactic traders began to notice subtle shifts in trade routes. Transport convoys that once passed through Sector H3 now detoured around the area. Maps were quietly updated, labeling certain regions as restricted. The Zarkon Dominion was no longer considered invincible. Rumors spread of the missing fleet, and other empires started second-guessing any plans to challenge human space. Fear spread faster than fleets, shaping strategies across the stars before any official statement could be made. Humans had gained control not by firepower alone, but by demonstrating consequences. Among alien fleets, disbelief turned into caution. High-ranking officers debated whether any civilization should attempt human space again. Fleet logs were scrutinized to understand what went wrong, yet most findings concluded one thing: humans were not to be tested. The Zarkon Dominion itself struggled to explain how a confident fleet, one that had entered with arrogance, could vanish so completely. Vorex Tal's disappearance became a warning across sectors. Stories circulated of the silent, invisible, and perfectly executed human countermeasures, amplifying fear and respect for the first time. Back in human space, ships continued their quiet patrols. HSS Dawnbreaker, HSS Valkyrie, and HSS Silent Oath maintained positions near key jump points. Their crews observed sensors, read signals, and monitored subtle space disturbances, but they made no unnecessary movements. Humans had proven their dominance without leaving a single trace of destruction visible to outsiders. For them, strategy was as important as combat. The galaxy's perception of human space shifted, not because humans had declared war, but because they had acted with precision, patience, and foresight. Political councils across nearby sectors reacted in a mix of awe and fear. Even minor planetary leaders who had previously ignored the Human Defense Council now took note. Diplomats who had planned to negotiate trade or alliances approached with extreme caution. Meetings were scheduled in secret to reassess strategies, treaties were quietly updated, and fleets were rerouted away from human-controlled zones. For centuries, humans had maintained borders, but the vanishing incident of Sector H3 made those borders tangible. The galaxy understood that human space was final, a place where trespassers disappeared without warning, and no one could intervene once they did. Within the Zarkon Dominion, commanders debated what had happened. Survivor accounts, few though they were, spoke of ships disabled in minutes, weapons useless against precision strikes, and communications blocked at critical moments. Tales of the dread carrier Void Crown being heavily damaged and support ships drifting powerless became legend among the Dominion's officers. The fear that humans inspired was no longer abstract. It was historical fact. Even the bravest officers hesitated at any mention of Sector H3, knowing the cost of arrogance. By the end of the weeks that followed, human space had achieved a new kind of dominance. Not through expansion, not through conquest, but by demonstrating that crossing their borders carried irreversible consequences. The galaxy learned that human patience was lethal, that silence could be more dangerous than any fleet, and that the vanishing incident of Sector H3 would echo for generations. Humans never needed to boast, yet their reputation now spread across every star system, not through words, but through absolute, undeniable results. Even after time passed, maps, whispers, and trade routes reminded all civilizations. Human space was not a challenge. It was a final line, and once crossed, mistakes were never repeated. The vanishing incident of Sector H3 became a story told quietly across the galaxy, though very few had seen it directly. Historians, traders, and diplomats all referred to it as the moment when humanity demonstrated that patience, preparation, and precision could be more powerful than sheer numbers. Long after the Zarkon fleet disappeared, humans continued their work silently, ensuring that every system, every fleet, and every star path remained secure. The lesson was clear. Human space was not meant to be tested, and anyone who tried would face consequences they could not escape. Centuries later, scholars on Terra Nova Prime analyzed the incident in detail. They wrote about the careful planning of human fleets, the anticipation of alien movements, and the invisible traps set throughout Sector H3. The dread carrier Void Crown and its escorts were studied not as a tale of destruction, but as a perfect example of human discipline and strategy. Captains like Elias Ward, Mira Cady, and Ronan Hale were remembered for their calm, decisive leadership. They had never rushed, never acted out of fear or pride, yet their actions had completely neutralized a fleet that had believed it was in total control. Across the galaxy, other civilizations updated maps and treaties. Human space was now marked clearly as restricted, dangerous, and final. No one could enter lightly, and no empire dared challenge human borders without extreme preparation. Traders adjusted routes to avoid areas that had been affected by the vanishing incident. Even minor alien worlds spoke of the humans with respect, not fear of war, but fear of precision, control, and patience. Humanity had earned a reputation that no boasts or threats could have created. Their power was in planning, in discipline, and in timing, and that lesson spread quietly but firmly across sectors. Humans themselves did not celebrate or expand recklessly after the incident. They had no need to. Their goal had always been protection, not conquest. Systems were monitored, fleets maintained, and training continued, but there was no boasting. Every patrol, every drill, every adjustment was done silently, as it had always been. The vanishing incident became part of a long history of measured human response, an example of how a civilization could control its borders with minimal risk and maximum effect. This quiet mastery became a core lesson taught to new officers and fleet commanders for generations. The Zarkon Dominion never fully recovered its pride. Officers spoke in hushed tones about the fleet that had entered human space and never returned. They studied human tactics obsessively, attempting to understand how a civilization they had once considered weak could execute such flawless control. Even decades later, the fear lingered. Commanders double-checked every mission near human space, and new fleets were built with caution and hesitation. The galaxy had learned that humans did not need large numbers, flashy weapons, or aggressive displays. They needed patience, precision, and a complete understanding of the opponent. For humans, the incident reinforced a timeless truth. Defense was most effective when it was invisible until the moment of action. By allowing the Zarkon fleet to believe it moved freely, humans had ensured that every decision the invaders made played into their control. The lesson was simple but powerful. Those who underestimate patience and precision always pay the price. Human leaders, from captains to council members, continued to plan with foresight, ensuring that every potential threat could be managed without unnecessary risk or exposure. Stories of the vanishing incident became lessons not only for humans, but for other civilizations who studied history. They learned that confrontation could be avoided by preparation, that visibility did not always mean strength, and that the outcome of any engagement depended as much on timing and control as on firepower. In every corner of the galaxy where the incident was studied, the same message emerged. Humans may not strike first, but when they act, their actions are absolute and final. In later centuries, the galaxy remembered one core truth. Humans did not seek revenge, conquest, or fame. They simply demanded that their space be respected. To enter human space once was a warning. To enter twice was impossible. Maps marked boundaries, whispers reminded travelers, and fleets avoided unnecessary encounters. The humans had established a standard that no one could ignore. The vanishing incident of Sector H3 was no longer just a story of a lost fleet. It was a symbol of human patience, strategy, and the final authority of their space. Civilization after civilization came to understand that one could challenge humans only once, and that once was enough to teach the galaxy an unforgettable lesson.